Alli, welcome to the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. How are you?
Good. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing awesome. It's good to catch up with you again. What's been going on?
Yeah, lots has been going on. Working on lots of projects and trying to work on productivity and time management and all that kind of good stuff.
Aren't we all,
Yeah,
first of all? And so you are an imposter syndrome coach.
that I am. Yeah.
And let's just dive right in. Like, what does that mean and why is that relevant for our listeners? Because I know you work kind of in tech sales or with people in tech sales.
Yeah.
And here we're on a health and fitness and nutrition podcast. And so I think the question, that people are going to be asking themselves is, how is that relevant to me?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, so first and foremost, like what is imposter syndrome, right? So the kind of formal clinical definition, if you will, that was created back in the 70s when the research was done on this phenomenon is incessant thoughts of inadequacy despite evidence of success. So really feeling like you're a failure and a fraud, although you actually have been successful.
Mm,
And so, yeah, my background is in the tech sales space. So that's obviously kind of, who I service because they will obviously identify with me and my background and my stories. And, from the anyone that's in tech sales is by default a hyperachiever, right? They're
mm,
just like, I mean, why would you be in sales if not, right? Like
sure.
it's commission based, like you make more money if you close more deals, right? Like achievement is baked into the formula of success as a salesperson. And I was actually thinking about this today. I've never really said this, but someone was messaging me about imposter syndrome, and he was kind of like, what do you really do? Which is what you just asked me, right? And I kind of want to say, like, honestly, I feel like I am helping recovering hyperachievers, like
Yeah.
because that's the problem, is like this hyperachievement that we're so focused on, right? That like thinking that achievement is going to be the thing that's going to make us feel better and make us feel whole, and all it does is dig the well deeper than it already was, right? Because the second you achieve a thing, guess what your mind's telling you?
Hmm.
Achieve another thing. It's the
Right.
next thing and it's the next thing. And so that's why they call it like the hamster wheel, right? Because it's just like it never, you're just in it, spinning around in circles, not really sure accomplishing things, but like at the core, like why my clients come to me is like, I've done it all, right? I've accomplished all this stuff, I'm a top performer, get promoted, la la la. And like, man, does it not feel fulfilling, you know?
Yeah.
And they're just like, what do I do? This is the only thing I've ever known, like in terms of how to be successful, right? And like, sure, I have success on paper, but I certainly don't have like a feeling of success in my life, right? Because what often happens too, as a hyperachiever, and when you have imposter syndrome, is like you're always trying to prove something. So you'll often say yes to more than you ever need to, which then
Yeah.
makes you work more than you would ever need to, which then makes you have to sacrifice things that you love, right? People and hobbies and whatever it might be. And then your life is literally work. And if
Right.
work is not the thing that's fulfilling you, you're like, what the hell am I?
What am I doing?
What do I
Why am I
have?
doing this?
Yeah, like what is left?
How do I find that level of fulfillment? And so then to kind of backtrack to health and fitness, what I can see a lot of similarity to is a lot of people have success in a lot of areas of their life, but ultimately find themselves neglecting their
Mm,
health, their fitness, nutrition, their family. And a lot of it comes back to, and I hear this quite a lot, is the feelings around that ultimately they feel like they just don't deserve to look
mm,
good, to feel good.
mm.
They compare themselves to others and say, I'll never look like that
Right.
person,
Yeah.
right? I don't, right, deserve to have the body that I want to have.
Yeah.
And or what else is prevalent is, you know what, I've tried so many times and
Yeah.
failed so many times
Yeah.
that
It could be different.
why bother trying again? Like I'll never be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, for sure. What I find with my clients is oftentimes, so right in the beginning of working with my clients, I have them kind of evaluate themselves based on four different categories. love, play, work, and health. And health is like purposefully at the bottom because health is the foundation of every ounce of success that you'll ever have in your life, right? And no one's coming to me like, I'm not a health coach, right? But it is absolutely a part of the coaching that I do, because usually, typically, health is like a 1 or a 2,
Mm.
And whenever I see that, I always dig in, because I'm like, okay, what's going on? Right. Because when you consistently, like you said, like when you consistently neglect your health, like, yes, there is a belief that you don't deserve it, but you're also creating evidence for your mind that you don't value yourself and your body every
Right.
single day, right? There's evidence telling you that, right? So now, how is your mind going to create thoughts that are anything other than, I don't really value myself?
Mm-hmm.
It has only evidence that you don't really value yourself, right? Like if you say yes to projects you don't really want to say projects to at work, and you neglect your friends or your family and all these things, I mean, like, that are seemingly important to you, right? Of course, if these things are important to your friends and your family, right? You're basically saying, yeah, I don't matter. I don't matter. Every single day, I don't matter. And so, of course, why the hell would they go pick up a weight or like go for a run, right? Like, why would you take care of something that doesn't matter? Right?
100%, 100%. And I think that so much of that has been perpetuated over the years by virtue of, again, just like focusing on every other aspect of their life but their health, as well as kind of perhaps like overly critical parents, overly critical
Mm-hmm.
teachers, sort of planting this, this idea in their head that in fact they're not worth it, they're not good enough, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine that's something that you have conversations around quite a lot.
The I'm not good enough talk track, yeah, is like exactly what I help people uncover, where it started, how they've perpetuated it in their life, and what keeps them believing it, right? Because like I said, if they have evidence of it every day, then of course you're going to keep believing it, right? I think the interesting part too around the health thing, like I said, I'm not a health coach, but we do talk about it in my coaching, because I noticed that with my clients whose health is a priority for them, i.e., they work out every day, they go for walks, or not every day, but whatever, like they eat well, they nourish themselves, like, they value their body is what I'm trying to say, right? That their speed and depth of transformation mentally and then in their
Mm.
lives is much quicker than people whose health is like kind of at an all-time low, or like really not a priority, or just kind of, not in the dumps a bit. I find that kind of they'll come back, we'll talk about a topic, something around a limiting belief, and like the next week it's like we're still talking about the same thing and the same thing. It's like it's not clicking, because again, every week they're proving to themselves that, like, that every week they have more evidence of like, I'm not enough, I don't matter, right?
So what are some of the tools that you utilize in the tech world for your hyperachievers to start to squash those limiting beliefs, and sort of how can we translate that into overcoming the limiting beliefs around, the similar things in weight loss and nutrition and worthiness, right? All of those things.
Totally, yeah. So the first and foremost is really recognizing what is the inner critic in you saying, right? Like what's the constant talk track, and when is it triggered the most, right? Because essentially, like I mentioned, like the inner critic was really developed in our childhood, right? So for me, as the hyperachiever, that's my inner critic, my biggest one, and I'm a people pleaser. And I, so it literally, I can see the direct correlation to, like, I got the people pleaser from my mom. She's a huge people pleaser. And I got the hyperachiever from my dad, who's like one of the
Sounds
most
familiar.
successful, yeah, one of the most successful people in his family, like the whole thing. Right. And so like, I just took on what I learned. Right. But I also made up a story, because I think everyone, no matter gender, kind of has daddy issues. Right. Because we live in a patriarchy. And so I made up a story when I was young that said, I need to be successful in terms of like the business world, and like I need to be productive and do the most and be the best at whatever I do, especially in the business world, so that my father will love me. Right. And of course, like he never said any of those things really,
Totally.
right? But I could tell, like, listen, kids aren't stupid. I could tell what he prioritized though. Like he wasn't around as much. He was always working, right?
Right.
So as a kid, I was like, okay, interesting,
Yeah.
right? So if
Yeah.
I do the most, right? If I'm always working, he will love me more, right?
Right.
I could show, I have something to show to him that he could love, right? Because as a kid, you just don't realize, like, when you're born, you know that you're enough because you don't have any other faculties to realize anything else, right? The whole world revolves around you. But then when you get to like 7 and 8, your brain develops in a way that you can feel regret and shame and all these different emotions. And that's when we start to develop this I'm not enough talk track, right? So long story short, we get deep into like, where did this come from, right? So, some of my clients, it's like, you need to be perfect, right? Like everything has to look perfect. Everything has to be perfect, right? So they develop this like stickler type of like critical mentality about everything. And they want to control everything because everything has to be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, these voices have been living in our head rent free, right? Just absolutely taking up all the space. And by having awareness and putting attention on them, we can start to really understand exactly what they say to us, the words, when they typically say it to us, right? So the triggers. And then we can also put those thoughts like on trial, if you will, right? So a lot of the times, like my clients will say like, but I'm scared that like someone's going to judge me or like they're going to say something and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, well, have you ever gotten feedback about this thing, any negative feedback about this thing that you've done many times in the past? They're like, oh God, no, everyone thinks I'm great. And I'm like, right. So you have zero evidence, right, that would ever prove this thought that you're having to be true, right? You don't have any evidence of it, right? And they're like, I guess you're right. So you kind of put your thoughts on trial to be like, show me the evidence, thoughts. I hear you, but like, show me where it's at. Show me the evidence. And like 99% of the time, they have no evidence of it, right? So you start to like, separate yourself from the thought, right? So it's like, it's not you, it's a thought. And because it's a thought and it's not you, the like logical, intellectual you, can put that thought on trial, but can also just say like, yo, take a hike. Mm-hmm. Like, get out of here. I'm not believing this today, right? Like, this is not helpful. I'm not into this. And what I often tell my clients, well, I have all of them do as a tool, is to give a name to that thought, the inner critic, right? So like one of my clients, his inner critic is restless, right? He's always like, what's the next thing? This is boring. I got to keep going, right? And so he calls that inner critic when it shows up, because he knows what it sounds like. He knows when it shows up, the triggers. So he calls it Kramer, right? Like from Seinfeld, right? Because he's totally spaz, right? And my client is like a self-proclaimed spaz, right? He just like called himself that. And so now he lives that identity because he's called himself that, right? And so what I helped him understand is that like, you are not a spaz. There's a voice inside you, the Kramer voice, that yes, says spazzy things. Only when you listen to him would you maybe show up as a spaz, but that is not you, right? It's just a voice inside of you. And what I also teach my clients is like, our imagination, i.e. these voices in us, are completely limitless. Like, we can think of anything. Like, I could ask you to think of something right now that you've never done or never seen or never witnessed, and you could think of it. Like, if I gave you enough detail, you could think of it. Your mind could create an image of it in your head. Mm-hmm. So if we can create anything in our minds, we can then have any thoughts, right? And we can then change any thoughts, right? So it's really about, the work that I do is really about helping people understand their thoughts and helping them understand that, like, if you can change your thoughts, you can change your reality.
Yeah, 100%. How does our environment impact the thoughts that we create that perpetuate the imposter syndrome?
Yes, such a good question. Such a good question, because there is environmental factors as well, right? So, so there was a Harvard Business Review article, the most popular one last year, and it was called "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome." And the article was really all around this, like the environments in which imposter syndrome is perpetuated, really, right? So, for example, like women in the tech world, I mean, it's still a predominantly male space, right? Yeah. So if you're a woman and you really want to be a VP of sales or whatever, some high title, and no one in your company is a woman and is a VP of sales or a VP of anything, that's an environment where it could be easier to feel some imposter syndrome around, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to become that because I don't have any evidence. Again, it always comes back to like evidence and data, right? I don't have any evidence that that's true, right? You might have evidence in other companies, but that also might make you want to leave the current company that you're at and go to other companies where there is more representation and evidence, right? So for sure, environment is a factor. And there's an analogy that I always use because I never advocate for people to leave their jobs or quit corporate or, do exactly what I did, right? Like you are on your own. I
do all the time.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they get there on their own, right? Like I don't need to advocate it. They'll get there on their own. But so, I'm very non-judgmental about whatever they choose, right? Because you can have success on your own terms in the corporate environment. You just need to learn how to create that for yourself versus like just blindly following the path of the corporate world, which is just like, work until you die and, retire, right? And never be fulfilled. So the analogy that I use oftentimes, because, it sometimes gets to that point in my coaching where the client realizes, I think I need to leave my job, right? Because it's like, we've done all the work on themselves really to understand like the inner critic, what do they value? What are their strengths? What motivates them? Like, what is the impact that they really want to have? And they go and try to have it and create that at their company. And it's like shot down or squashed or whatever it might be. And it's like, so the analogy that I use is about that. It's not this plant, but it's about a plant in a pot. So I had a peace lily. And peace lilies flower, right? They have the white flowers. And for whatever reason, no matter what I did with my peace lily, I was like, like brushing its leaves, taking the dust off. I like distilled the water I was trying everything to like take care of this peace lily so it would bloom and be beautiful. Nothing worked, like literally nothing. And here I am, I'm like, I'm such a bad plant owner. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And finally I Googled it to be like, how the hell do you get a peace lily to flower? And the answer was that the pot that it's in is too small. It will never grow and it will never become beautiful because the pot that it's in is too small. And I literally use that analogy with every single one of my clients.
That's great.
Because they always get to that point where I'm like, the pot's too small. Like you're never going to bloom. You're never going to blossom. The pot that you're in is too small.
I love that. And, one of the things what this makes me think about with respect to sort of, because I'll say that the majority of the people listening are not corporate, especially females, like, listening to this are not corporate executives, right? They're probably busy moms and dads looking to improve their energy and lose some body fat and, perhaps young kids at home. And I think, especially for women, is a lot of times they get lost in the responsibilities and expectations around everything that they're supposed to be doing, right? Around the fact that they're supposed to be a mom, around the fact that they're also supposed to perhaps have a career, around also they're supposed to be, homemaker. Also, they're supposed to look amazing all of the time. And sort of aligning that in addition to my question about their environment of, and I guess I'm tackling a couple things here and you can approach it any way you want, but I think so much of it is around the expectations inherent in just the community environment, right? The social, their social support system, what's perpetuated in media, and this is both for males and females equally, especially when I think about environment, right? To the degree that it's probably pretty darn easy now that we have an understanding of what this imposter syndrome is. Like, let's be honest, we all experience this in a multitude of ways, but it's very reasonable that the average Jane and Joe is going to be experiencing this, right, by virtue of everything I just described.
Yeah. So I'm certified in positive psychology. And one of the studies that we learned about was, I can't remember who did it or, all those specifics, but it was basically like they asked women to write down all the things that they are responsible for, like in a day or, just like in their life. Right. And women wrote down like 13 to 15 things. right? And then they asked men the exact same question. And the average was 3 things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning that, like, yes, the media and our social gender norms and roles and whatnot, like every woman I've ever met has been programmed and bred and, raised to have a list of 13 to 15 things at all times of life, right? It doesn't matter, right? And men have 3, right? It's like, be strong, make money, like, like it's like be stable and be financially successful, right? Basically it, and maybe fit, I guess. I don't know. I can't remember what the one was, but for women, it's like the house should be clean and like this, blah, 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 all these things, right? And that's also why I think that there's like this myth around that women have imposter syndrome and men don't, or that women have it more than men, because we're kind of like, everyone's their own worst enemy, but like women are their own worst enemy in the sense that like they keep the to-do list at an unmanageable level at all times, right? And then you have to think about that, like we were saying right before we started recording, right? Of like, who the hell is telling me to do these things, right? Like I am my own boss, right? I run my own company. Like no one is telling me that I need to work 13 hours in a day, right? Like those are my choices. But it's like, if I chose that, I can choose something different too, right? Like I'm always that choice. And there is so many tools that you can use in terms of, that the list for women that just says like, that helps you figure out what is the priority today, the 1 or 2 things, not the 17, right?
Yeah.
So that at the end of the day, because the biggest thing is that like most people, especially with remote work, we did a whole session on that yesterday about like remote work and the challenges with it. One of the biggest challenges for people is like, you get to the end of the day and you don't feel accomplished, right? And so you do that every day, 365 days. I mean, isn't that like just cause for imposter syndrome? Because you're like, I'm never enough. It's never enough. It's never enough, right? But the cause of it isn't because you're not enough, right? That's easy. We're so good at beating ourselves up. The cause of it is that you're not managing your to-do list and your tasks and whatever it is in a way that actually honors you and actually recognizes all the things that you do, right? All the things that you do accomplish. But if you put in a day that you need to do 10 things and you only get to do 2 a day, and then you feel like shit about it, you have to give your head a shake and be like, wait, who put the 10 things there?
Yeah, no, right.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I would say just because men don't have the sheer volume of perceived expectations on their plate, they still have equally unrealistic expectations, to the degree that it's not uncommon for me to speak to men and be like, they want to be shredded, right? Like
always,
six-pack abs, and then of course like have, bulging muscles, and then of course be like the best father in the world, but of course be extremely successful in their business and in corporate and whatever it is. And so what I'm hearing is so much around, one, setting realistic expectations, and then, which is so much of what we discuss, is like, listen, for someone that's going to come and work with us for a year for weight loss, it's like, we're not going to go from 30% body fat to 10% shredded, body fat in a year.
Yeah.
Right. Or ever, for that matter. And who
and what's the value? Like,
why would you even want to be there? How is that going to serve you? That's a whole different story. But, who made you think that was even something that was reasonable, right, for you?
Yeah.
And then similarly,
and or worth it, right? I think we just like make these goals of like, be cool. And you're like, what's cool? Like, how is that valuable?
Well, at the end of the day, it's like, why am I doing this? Especially when, you get to the point where it's that teeter totter of is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Of the trade-off, the sacrifices that need to be made, to the degree that oftentimes when you get to the other side of that pendulum, it's, well, I was all business, no life, and wanting to get healthier, get leaner, have more family time. Now I'm all 100% focused on me, quote unquote, health, body composition, but I've still completely negated family time. Now
Right.
business is suffering. So there always needs to be this balance. But, within that is identifying, well, what are the accomplishments that of paying attention to and acknowledging the accomplishments that you're creating on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to give you the evidence
Yeah.
that you need
Yeah. To keep going.
to, yeah, to keep going and stop giving yourself the guilt and the fear and the shame of not living up to what you perceive to be something that is probably not attainable anyways.
Totally. And I think I'm sure you do this with clients, right? It's even goal setting, teaching people how to goal set, right? Because if someone's goal is like, I need to lose 35 pounds, right? Sure, that is a goal, right? But it is not actually going to serve you in the sense that like, what does that define about you, right? Like how does that, like, in the sense of like, you need to create a goal that is an identity shift, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not about the 35 pounds. What you're actually trying to do is you're trying to create an identity of someone who loves their body,
Right.
loves fitness, and makes healthy choices, right? So when they have the choice to eat a hamburger or a salad, it's like, well, I'm trying to create an identity of a healthy person. What would a healthy person do in this situation? Versus, I need to lose 35 pounds. And so I'm not,
Right.
like, it's so, I heard this on a podcast with James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, right? Because, people love setting these like goals that are results, right? That's a result and that's an
Right.
outcome, right? The 35 pounds. But what is the lifestyle that you're going to need to lead in order to
That's
achieve
it.
that result? And is that actually a lifestyle that you're even going to like? Because guess what? If it's not, then you're not going to do it. Then you're going to beat yourself up and blah, 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 right?
Right.
So it's like, there's so much in goal setting. And that's where I start with my clients, right? Because in the first call, they kind of tell me what their goals are. And then I'm like, we'll refine those in a bit. Like, well, once we start working together, we're
You'll
going to
start to
refine things.
understand as we progress how
Well,
that,
because the goal is actually always self-acceptance.
right.
That's
Right.
at the bottom of this whole pyramid, right? Is like, without self-acceptance, good luck. Like, all you're going to do is be in like whatever rat race you're in. It doesn't have to be the corporate rat race, but what you're going to be in a rat race of your own creation for the rest of your life, because all you're going to ever try to do is prove that you're good enough.
Well, totally. And
Right.
often in health and fitness, it's like we're going to go down the rabbit hole of getting as lean as possible. And then you get there, but it's not sustainable. And
Totally.
then you're going to get back to normal lifestyle. And
Yeah.
then you'd be like, all I want to do is, when I was there, like, all I want to do is get back to there, or next time I'm going to try harder or do more. And ultimately, none of it is lending itself to, right? When you were there, you weren't happy either. You were like,
Right.
okay,
Exactly.
let's take the
What
picture
is it
and
about
then
that
what?
weight? Yeah.
No, I'm so grateful that you mentioned that, because I mean that's at the foundation of what we try and help our clients with. In fact, part of our mission is to help our clients change their belief system around what it means to be healthy,
Yeah.
right? Because we can set the goal right initially out of the gate is, yeah, like 35 pounds. That's amazing, right? But we understand, and we're going to help you understand, that you actually need to change as a person. You need to become the type of person that actually enjoys doing the things that that necessitate losing and maintaining that weight, eating healthier foods and moving more frequently and hanging around with the type of people that also do the
Right.
same thing. Speaking of
Yeah.
environments,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to share this story because I also was on a LinkedIn Live this week with another fitness coach, because it is honestly a huge part of my life. It is an identity that I have. I just worked out before this.
Nice.
So, so the story that I shared this on LinkedIn too, but maybe not all your listeners are on there. So, because what you just described, about the beliefs about ourselves, and yeah, I just mentioned self-acceptance. So for the longest time, I would weigh myself every single day. It was a routine. It was like a ritual in the morning of like, I'd wake up and I'd go to the bathroom and then I'd weigh myself, which was always very convenient because it's the lightest you're ever going to be in a day. Right. So And I never dared weigh myself like in the middle of the day or at the end of the day. I didn't want to know that. Right. But so that was the ritual. I go to the bathroom and I weigh myself, and the scale was right beside, in the bathroom. And depending on what the scale said, right. So if the number was over my arbitrary set point, I just like gave who told me, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, right. Or whatever. Right. My arbitrary set point, if it was over that number, I felt like shit all day, right? I beat myself up in my head and whatever. And if it was under that number, I'm like, I'm the best. Like I can have a good day today, right? And I'll probably even treat myself with like a piece of cake today, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? But so I did that for years. And then one day, as I started to learn more about like our thoughts and, how they become our reality and our beliefs and our identity, I asked myself, what if I just didn't weigh myself every day? And the immediate inner critic thought was like, are you crazy? Like you'll get fat. Like you can't do that. You'll get fat, which is like, this deep belief in my mind. Right. And I heard it in that moment. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I don't trust myself. Right. I trust the scale. Right. I'm giving my power to the scale and the number on the scale. I do not trust myself to be able to maintain a healthy, functional weight that, feels good and that I can still, do the things that I want to do. Like I do not trust myself. Right. And so from that day on forward, I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work for me. Right. Like I don't want to be controlled by this number. And although I was being controlled by it, it felt like it was serving me. Right. Obviously misleadingly, right. It like wasn't actually, but it felt that way. Right. And when I finally came to be like, oh my God, I don't trust myself. I obviously now don't weigh myself. I've been also traveling a lot. There's no scales in Airbnbs, which is fantastic. But, but I never really weigh myself. Like sometimes, just to kind of check in, hey, where are things at? Right. Right. But not to make myself, not to be controlled by that number or not. Right. Like, frankly, I've gained 10 pounds since the pandemic and I don't really care anymore. Right. Like this seems to be my new like weight and I'm good with that. Right. But that realization of I didn't trust myself and that I was being controlled by a number external to myself that, by the way, I set, like, again, like we are setting ourselves these unrealistic expectations, for my clients in the sales world, right? Like their quota is that external number that they didn't die by the quota. Right. Well, and they didn't even set the quota. So like, there is a bit of like someone else doing that, but oh my God, people's self-worth is absolutely tied to that number, right? If they do well 1 month, they're on top of the world. And if they don't do well 1 month, they're, in their minds, a piece of crap. Right. Yeah. And it's just absolute ebb and, peak and valley of feeling good or not good about myself based on some external number that, by the way, like some tech bro made up in a fucking boardroom for whatever, because like they have some, kind of dream about being a unicorn or whatever, like what does this even mean? Right. Yeah. And it was the same thing for the scale. Like, what does this number even mean? Really? Right. Right. Like, sure. Yeah. Maybe it's in a pretty good range of health, but like still very arbitrary.
No, but that hits the nail on the head. Is like, what is it? What's the significance of this number in your mind? Like when we have a conversation and you say you want to be 140 pounds, it's like, why? Like what can you do at 140 pounds? How does your self-worth change? How do your confidence levels change? How do you, clothes fit? Like, how are you a different person? And what does that person represent that you're not currently embodying? Yeah. That's really the name of the game. Yeah. That's great. It's so good. So,
one more thing.
Yeah, please.
There was one of my best sales teachers of all times, which was like the moment where I was like, oh, wow, I can be in the sales world because he proved to me that you can do sales differently. So his name is Guru Ganesh. He's like a white guy, but with a turban and a huge beard, like went like super spiritual Kundalini. And he's an amazing sales instructor and teacher. And so at Salesforce, we got exposure to him quite a bit. And him and I are actually now friends, which is amazing because he was like the reason why I was like, okay, sales can be like not just aggressive snake oil kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so one of the foundational principles of his sales training, which is, by the way, called conscious selling, which is like so nice, right? There you go. One of the foundational principles of his sales training is that to embody the mentality that you are financially independent and you do not need this person's money or like this deal that you're about to talk to, right? Like this opportunity. Like you always need to embody that, like, you are good no matter what happens. It is not going to change anything about you and your worth and nothing, right? Because then you won, like you've won. People are going to be throwing money at you because they're just like, wait, like, because, you know, we always want what we can't have, right? So if you're just like, yeah, hey, maybe this isn't for you, they're like, whoa, wait a second, you know, maybe I do want this to be for me, right? But if you're like, listen, this is why you're going to love it, it's going to be great for you, everyone's like, yeah, no, thank you. Like, I don't need to like try to convince me of something that you're clearly not that confident about, because why are you trying to convince me of it, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll have to check out his stuff, but dead on as far as that mindset around, look, I can, you know, give it or take it, right? Yeah, give it or leave it. So what are like the most kind of, what's a good first step for people that are listening, sort of understanding more about this imposter syndrome, identifying with the areas that we talked about that resonate with them, starting to see, okay, like, yeah, this is present in some areas, and what can I do? What can we do? What can our listeners do to kind of start to identify or dig into those a little bit and make the shift?
I think the easiest thing to do, and the most kind of impactful, to be quite honest, and it's something that a habit of mine that I developed a very long time ago that I attribute to like a lot of the mental mastery and kind of, mental mastery, I guess, in my own life, is gratitude journaling every day. So I follow the 5-minute journal method, but I've added a little bit to it, because so the 5-minute journal method is, in the morning, you write down 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that would make the day great. And they should be things that are in your control. So like, don't write every day, like, I really hope it's sunny today. Like,
yeah, I win the lottery or some shit
right,
like that.
Like, that doesn't matter, right? Not going to be something you can do, right? And then an affirmation for the day, right? So like, one that I often still use, right, is I'm already enough.
Yeah.
Right. Just to remind myself, like, don't go into this, doing more mode, right? You're already enough. Then at the end of the day, you review like what was great about today, right? 3 things that was great about the day. Then you write down like, what's one thing I could have maybe done differently to have a, more productive, not even more productive, but a better day, right? More satisfying day. And then the thing that I added is, where did I judge myself today? Because that's the part where you start to tap into the inner critic and start to hear and be able to pinpoint what they continuously tell you, right? Because all judgment is is your critic, right? And this does a couple things. One, habit building is super important for your entire life, right? Like, being able to create a habit in your life is just one of the most powerful tools that you'll need to be successful in anything. But 2, going back to evidence, right? It will give you a bunch of evidence, right? After you do it for a while, of, especially in the 3 things that you're grateful for, the things that you value most in life. Right. So literally, without fail, it might be a bit of a cop out, but I don't think it is. I write my health every single day. Like, I'm always grateful for my health, because guess what? Tomorrow, I don't know what's going to happen. Right. So I am going to be grateful for it today, and I'm going to be grateful for it every day, because I don't ever want to be in a situation where I can't do the things I want to do because of my health and my body. Right. So I'm going to be grateful for it today. So clearly, the health is important to me. Right. Oftentimes I'll write something about nature, and oftentimes I'll write something about a relationship, right? Like a friend or, my partner, or whatever it might be, showing me that, like, clearly my health, nature, and relationships, like community, is super important to me, right? And you'll start to see the trend over time, right? So it'll give you evidence of your values, which is super important. The second part is the things that will make today great. This is the expectation setting that we were talking about, right? So I take that as an opportunity to kind of create like a mini to-do list, not always of like work stuff that I need to do, but even like, call a friend, right? Or whatever it might be. But I really stick to those 3 things. And sometimes I don't do them all, but I always try to be compassionate with myself in that list, to know that, like, I'm not going to conquer the world today. or ever. And this is the only three things that really matter truthfully today of getting done. Yeah, sure, there's other shit on the list, but like today,
Right.
this is what's going to make today great. Not all, let's not project into the future. And then the judgment thing, like I said, is the third piece, which is really getting acquainted with the inner critic to really understand, like, where is it showing up the most for you, right? Because then once you have, a lot of data and evidence on that, you can start to dig in, right? Okay, clearly it shows up most, whatever it is at work, or like clearly it shows up most in my, like, how I talk about my body to myself, right? You never like, and maybe it's both, because that happened to me, but you'll start to realize, like, where is kind of the first entry point that I need to dig in to see, like, what's really going on behind the scenes here, right?
Yeah, that's great. I love that, and appreciate how it helps you align with realistic expectations that are in fact in line with your values, or help you identify what your values are by virtue of what your expectations are, or what you appreciate from the day. Similarly, is how to acknowledge the accomplishments from day to day in a realistic way. And then and then identifying and speaking to the inner critic as just showing up on your radar, right? You keep seeing it.
It's happening, but you're not noticing it. And that's the worst place to be,
And then, as you can said, is name it, start to identify it, and then choose to silence it.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever way works best for you. That's amazing. Alli, tell us how people can find out more about you.
Yeah, so my website is a pretty good place to check out in terms of my story and my program. I have a signature 4-month program. You can check out some of the other podcasts I've been on as well. So my website is www.allirizacos.com. And most importantly, if today resonated with you, you can book a call with me to see if there could be a fit for us working together.
Amazing. I appreciate it. It definitely resonated with me on a multitude of levels, especially as a business owner, as a, podcaster, if you will, right? Just a number of things that I think we all deal with. And this is something we all experience.
Absolutely.
Right. In so many different ways. And I can be the first one to say, I mean, every single one of these episodes, and it ends up being like, why am I doing this? Who's going to listen to this?
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
And so I appreciate you, and I want to thank you for your time. And if you guys resonated with Alli today, make sure to reach out and follow her, and maybe schedule a call to see how she can help you. Thank you so much. And I'll look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thanks, Ben.